They laughed when my lawyer asked me to stand. My mother actually whispered, "This will be quick." Then the judge looked up from the file and said my name like it mattered. That was the moment everything cracked. The laughter didn't stop immediately. It rolled through the courtroom like a careless breeze, small, confident, dismissive. I felt it brush past my face, felt it settle in my chest. I kept my eyes on the wood grain of the bench in front of me, counting the tiny scratches like they were anchors. Somewhere behind me, my ex-husband shifted in his seat. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I knew that posture. Relaxed. Amused. Certain. The judge cleared his throat. Silence fell so fast it felt physical. That was when I realized this wasn't going to end the way they thought. I'm 36 years old. I work as a logistics consultant in Seattle. Quiet job, invisible to people who don't know how money actually moves. I'd been married to Daniel for 11 years. Together for 13. Long enough that our routines felt older than our arguments. Long enough that people assumed we were solid because we didn't post much, didn't fight in public, didn't make scenes. Distance doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like separate coffee mugs drying on the rack. Like him eating dinner earlier because he had a call. Like me staying late at work because the office felt calmer than home. It started small. It always does. Daniel stopped asking questions. Not the big ones, just the small, human ones. How was your day? Did that meeting go okay? He'd nod while scrolling, half listening, already somewhere else. When I talked about work, he smiled politely, the way people do when they don't understand but don't want to admit it. You're lucky, he used to say. Your job isn't stressful like mine. That should have bothered me more than it did. The first betrayal wasn't an affair. It was financial. I found out by accident, the way most ugly truths arrive, through something boring. A tax notice. A discrepancy. A number that didn't make sense. Daniel had refinanced our house without telling me. When I asked him about it, he didn't deny it. He sighed. Like I was exhausting. I handled it, he said. You wouldn't have understood the terms anyway. I remember standing in the kitchen, the refrigerator humming, my hands cold even though it was summer. I asked why my name wasn't on the new paperwork. He didn't even look up. Because it was cleaner this way. Cleaner. As if I were clutter. That was the beginning of the gaslighting. Every question I asked became proof of my emotional instability. Every concern was overthinking. When I pushed back, he'd soften his voice, tilt his head. You're so sensitive lately, he'd say. I worry about you. Then came the humiliation. At a dinner party with his colleagues, someone asked what I did. Before I could answer, Daniel laughed. She helps companies move boxes, he said. Very glamorous. Everyone chuckled. I smiled because that's what you do when you don't want to ruin the evening. But something in me folded inward, quietly. Later that night, when I told him it hurt, he shrugged. You're reading too much into it. You know I was joking. That phrase, you're reading too much into it, became his shield. His way out of every moment that mattered to me. The cheating came later. Emotional at first. Messages he hid. A phone he kept face down. I didn't confront him right away. Not because I was weak, but because I needed to be sure I wasn't imagining things the way he always said I was. When I finally did, he didn't apologize. He leaned back on the couch, arms crossed, and said, I never loved you the way you needed. You were convenient. The word landed between us like a verdict. By the time we filed for divorce, my family had already chosen sides. They loved Daniel. He was charming. Successful. Predictable. He brought wine to holidays and remembered birthdays. I was the quiet one. The one who didn't explain her work well. The one whose success didn't look like success. When the legal process began, I learned just how far that loyalty went. My parents testified against me. Not out of cruelty. Out of belief. They believed Daniel when he said I hadn't contributed much financially. They believed him when he said I'd checked out. They believed him when he said I was unstable, overwhelmed, incapable of managing assets. In the hallway outside the courtroom, my sister leaned close and whispered, "Just let him have it. You don't need much. Start over." That was when they laughed. When my lawyer, a woman half my size with a voice steady as steel, asked the judge to review the financial disclosures again, Daniel smirked. My father shook his head. My mother folded her hands like she was praying for this to end quickly. They thought I was weak because I hadn't argued loudly. Because I hadn't defended myself in family meetings. Because I'd stayed quiet while my life was slowly rewritten without my consent. What they didn't know was that silence can be preparation. The judge began reading. Not opinions. Not accusations. Numbers. Accounts Daniel didn't know existed. Companies he'd never paid attention to because they weren't flashy. Investments that didn't carry my name loudly, but legally, irrevocably, belonged to me. I watched Daniel's posture change. Just slightly. The smirk faded. He leaned forward. The judge continued. He explained how the refinancing had been unlawful. How assets had been misrepresented. How control had been assumed without authority. My mother's mouth fell open. My father looked at me for the first time in months. Really looked. The laughter didn't return. Daniel whispered something to his lawyer. She didn't respond. When the judge finally looked up, his voice was calm. Almost gentle. "Ms. Harris," he said, "you've been remarkably patient." That sentence did something to me. I felt it loosen a knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The ruling wasn't dramatic. No gavel slam. No speeches. Just clarity. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd walked in, not because I'd won something, but because the story they'd told about me no longer had power. Daniel didn't apologize. He avoided my eyes. My parents didn't rush to me. They needed time. I understood that. What surprised me was how little I needed their validation anymore. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a smaller place. On purpose. I took long walks. I let myself grieve, not just the marriage, but the version of myself that had believed being quiet meant being invisible. I wasn't weak. I was careful. And there's a difference. If there's a lesson here, it's this. People will underestimate you when they benefit from your silence. Let them. Just don't confuse quiet with surrender. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is wait until the truth speaks for itself, and be ready when it does.